Hello everyone, this is Mr. Prometheus, and welcome to part 3 of the Comprehensive Mesmer Guide. In this edition, we're going to be talking about the slot skills that Mesmers have, from your heals to your utilities and your elite. What this video is going to cover is not just what they do, but also how they work in conjunction with one another, and we'll give you some tips and tricks for using these particular skills. Before we get into the content, however, I'd like to thank everyone who's been watching the videos thus far. The response has been extremely positive, and I really appreciate that everyone is taking the time to make comments and thank me for making the guide. I'm really happy also to hear that there are plenty of people out there who are seeing their characters, their Mesmers, in a new light, and that makes me feel very good. I want people to enjoy the class as much as I have, so I'm very, very happy to see that. So keep watching and keep commenting, and please leave me feedback, because the more feedback that I get, the better the content will be in the future. So let's hop right into what we're going to talk about today. The first thing we'll cover is heals. So as with every other class, Mesmers have access to 3 heals. The first one I will want to discuss is called Mirror. And as you can see, it's on a 15-second cooldown and allows you to reflect projectiles, and it has a small heal. It's not a big one, but the trade-off for it being a small heal is that it's also on a short cooldown. There are classes out there that have 30-second, 40-second heals, and they don't heal for quite as much, or they heal for around the same amount when you take time into consideration. So don't be too daunted by the small heal. One trade-off with having a small heal on a short cooldown, however, is that you do need to cast it more often if you want to get a full benefit of the heal. Sometimes you'll be lower than 39-15, negative in your health pool, and you'll want to get more healing out of it, and you'll have to wait. So there's definitely some drawback there. But you do get a nice ability in reflecting projectiles. Now, in full disclosure, I generally do not actually use Mirror. I don't think it's a bad spell, but I don't use it that often because it is very situational. And this brings me to my first point about all of the slot skills, and just about Guild Wars 2 in general. And that is that if you are playing this game properly, you are constantly switching out your slot skills based on the situation that's presented in front of you. You're obviously going to use different ones in structured PvP and tournaments. You'll use different ones in dungeons, and you'll use different things in World versus World as well. Additionally, you use different ones while you level up. Now, Mirror fits into a fairly small niche, and what that niche is if you are in a situation where you're taking lots of ranged projectile damage, it shines. When would that happen? For example, in World versus World in a castle siege, Mirror can be a very good spell to have, because a lot of the damage that happens in castle sieging is done with ranged projectiles. It's very rare to see someone suicide themselves down and jump out of the castle unless they're trying to do something pretty fancy. So the majority of the damage that you're going to receive in a World versus World castle siege is going to be ranged, and Mirror is going to be really helpful to keep you alive in a situation like that. Additionally, there are some instances in the game in PvE when you're going to want to use Mirror, specifically in dungeons. I can recall a very specific example in Caudicus's Manor. Now, Caudicus's Manor is one of the first dungeons that you encounter. I believe it's actually the second that you encounter after Ascalonian Catacombs. And in that explorable mode version, and I won't tell you which one, so you can still be surprised by it and get one shot the way I did, there is a moment where you're walking down a hallway, and there are some mobs at the end of the hallway and some mobs on the left that are going to ambush you, and it's ranged. So the mobs on the left aren't all ranged, but there are mobs in the back that are. And what you need to do in this case, or what you can do in this case, is utilize Mirror to keep yourself invulnerable from their attacks while you heal yourself, which can be very, very helpful. So just keep an eye out, and remember that Mirror is in your repertoire, because there are some times when you're going to want it. That being said, the heal that I prefer is Ether Feast. This heal is much stronger on the onset and only a 20-second cooldown, so it's on a pretty short cooldown as well. 20 seconds is considered a very fast heal. Additionally, the nice benefit about Ether Feast is that the heals per illusion is the heals per illusion feature. Now, what that means is that every illusion that you've got up, it heals for an additional 640, which is great. Especially if you can time it properly. So there's some nuance to using this, but what we can do, for example, is if I come over here and I'll summon mirror images so that you can get an idea as to what I'm talking about. But if we, for example, summon the sword phantasm and couple mirror images, and I go to shatter, what you can actually do is shatter and start the heal at the same time, and you can get the advantage of the heal before all of your clones and phantasms shatter. Now, the sword phantasm did actually make it in and shatter before anything, before the heal went off, but the other two didn't. So if you can time it well, you'll be able to get the full effect of the heal and still maintain proper, if you will, shattering without too much of an interruption. So Ether Feast, for that particular reason, is extremely, extremely good. It also just is the biggest heal that Mesmers have access to, and Mesmer's health pool is considered medium range. Classes like Guardians and Elementalists have a very small health pool, and classes like Mesmers have what would be known as a medium health pool. Warriors tend to have a very high health pool. So Ether Feast just, it shines in that particular scenario, and it's really the default heal. It's really what you should be using as a default. Now, given that, there's also Mantra of Recovery. Now, this gets into mantras as a type of utility, and you can see here that there are a bunch of them down here, and it's one of the Mesmer's classes of utility skills. I don't know if that's how they're actually described, but I describe them as classes of utility skills. And what that means is, for example, like Guardians have consecrations, and they have shouts. All classes have signets. And Mesmers have mantras as one of them. So one of the heals is actually a mantra in addition to having mantras available as utility skills. So what is a mantra? It's a 4-second cast that you charge up. And once you've charged the mantra, you get this little buff here that for example, this particular spell is called Power Return once it's charged. And it's a 26-20 heal. You can see that there's a 2 in the tooltip right here, which means that you actually get 2 casts of the mantra before anything, before you have to charge it up again. So if I cast the mantra on myself here, you can see that it's a 1-second cooldown, and that's in the tooltip. And then this number 2 has disappeared, and then we just have the icon for Power String. So if I cast it again, I'll heal myself, and then the Mantra of Recovery will go on a 10-second cooldown. So what does this mean? Internally, and in general, the way that you handle mantras, and this is going to bleed over into our first look at our utility skills, which we'll go over the mantras there too, is that you cast them while you're getting ready to fight. So, for example, if there are guys around this corner, then you're ready to go. So that 4-second cast is a huge disadvantage, and you want to make sure that you're not in combat. You can cast them in combat, but you just don't want to for the most part. You want to go into a fight with mantras ready. So it has some utility and it has some purpose, but Mantra of Recovery is generally only used in a build that's taking advantage of mantras, and otherwise you don't use it. And we'll get into a build that explores mantras a little bit later when I start doing build videos after we've covered the basics. So if you have interest in a mantra build, and I think they're interesting, I'm not sure about their power level right now. I think they need some tweaking. Stay tuned, and we'll go over it at some point in the future. But that's Mantra of Recovery. So that is the other heal. So as a review, Ether Feast is the heal that you're going to use for the most part. Mirror is a heal that you can use on occasion depending on your scenario. And Mantra of Recovery is a heal that you will use in very, very narrow scenarios that are taking advantage of mantra builds. Otherwise, it's generally not worth it. Now we can use Mantra of Recovery to hop over into the other mantras that we have access to. So let's go look at a target golem here, and I'm going to channel Mantra of Pain. Now, Mantra of Pain is, again, a 4-second cast, and it will do a damage spike on a target. So you get the same type of buff here, Mantra of Pain ready, and you can take a look at the target golem and shoot Mantra of Pain at him. So on a crit, on a heavy golem, and I am in a full power build right now, it did about 1500. We can look at a light golem here, and it's about 2000 on a crit. That was actually pretty lucky that I got a crit on both times. So I'm going to charge it up again, and we can hopefully see some base damage, and maybe I won't crit. So about 879 on a heavy, and I guess the light golem just, you know, we have it in for the light golem, unfortunately. So, but you can get an idea as to the damage in a full power-based build. An interesting thing about Mantra of Pain is that after you've channeled it, if you look away from your target, like I'm not facing this heavy golem, you can still cast the spell. Now, there's not really an animation to it. Again, let's look at the heavy golem and zoom in a little bit. There's no animation whatsoever, but it does do the damage, and you can see that this is gone. So again, I'm going to basically just cast it really quickly, and I'm going to double spike. You can cast it really, really fast. 1, 2. Which is good. So this is a nice damage supplement, and Mantra of Pain is pretty much the only mantra that I use without being in a mantra-esque build. Now, there are some utilities for distraction and resolve, and I need to get out of combat, so I'm going to run away as I speak here. I shouldn't actually say that Mantra of Pain is the only one that can be used outside of a mantra build, actually, because there are some uses for the other two. But Mantra of Pain you see used more often because it's just some spike damage, and it's nice, especially those Mesmers who feel like they're not doing enough damage, will often pick Mantra of Pain and use it in conjunction with their other skills to just deal some more damage. That's fine. I think Mantra of Pain is a good spell. It's nice to have a little extra spike damage. It's run of the mill, and it's pretty useful, but you know, I'm not so impressed with it. Mantra of Distraction, on the other hand, is very interesting. Now, it's on a longer cooldown, and one thing that we can look at here on Power Lock and Mantra of Distraction. Power Lock is the name of the spell that is cast off of the mantra. So this spell here is called Power Lock. Now, interestingly here, ArenaNet really needs to work on the Mesmer a little bit more in some cases, because the tooltip buff is Mantra of Confusion. The mantra is called Mantra of Distraction, and Power Lock is the spell that it should be called. So if you mouse over this thing, this should actually be called Power Lock right now, and this should be either Mantra of Distraction is ready or Power Lock is ready. Just strange. I want them to look at mantras a little bit more, but let's look at it. So if we look at the cooldown, Power Lock is on a 5-second cooldown, and that means that the time in between casting the first and the second Power Lock is 5 seconds. And then once you've cast the second one, it goes on a 30-second cooldown. Now, why is it such a long cooldown? The reason why is because it's a daze, and we've been through dazes before, but dazes is a straight up interrupt and stop all action, and dazes are pretty powerful. So having the ability to daze a target, especially if you see something big happening, if someone's in SPVP and they're going to stomp your friend, or if you're in PvE and there's a mob that's doing a pretty big attack and you want to make sure that you don't get hit by it, Power Lock, or just daze in general, can be very, very strong. Additionally, as we were looking at before, Diversion is a shatter that does daze as well. It's niche, it's used in certain scenarios, but daze can be very, very good, and because of that, Power Lock can be very, very good. However, it is generally used in a build that's focused on interrupting. It can be a nice thing to have, and if you're in a mantra build, obviously you're going to be picking this no matter what. So it's a good one. I like this mantra a lot, actually. I think it's a nice choice, and it can be used alone if you're in a build that wants to make sure that you can stop people from doing things. Now, if you look at the Mesmer's other abilities, the pistol, for example, has a daze on it as well. It also has a stun, and the greatsword has like a knockback. So there are other ways to interrupt. You don't have to pick this particular utility, but if you need a couple interrupts, or you want more, Power Lock is a fine thing to pick. And then there is Power Cleanse, or Mantra of Resolve. This is on a 20-second cooldown, and again, as we cast it here, same thing, 4 seconds, and then we can see that Mantra of Removal is ready. Now, again, Mantra of Resolve, Mantra of Removal, that's bizarre. I don't know why they did that. And actually, as we look at Mantra of Pain here, I'm actually curious, I haven't looked yet, to see if Mantra of Pain, they call Mantra of Pain Mantra of Pain, so that's a little strange. And Power Return, they call Power Return rather than Mantra of Recovery. So ANET's a little, they got to do some work. Anyway, so you can see that I actually have 4 mantras all ready to go here, and what this one does is it removes 2 conditions. Now, removing 2 conditions, yawn. It's good. I mean, it's always nice to remove conditions, and technically it removes 4 conditions if you cast it twice. I just don't think that putting a 4-second cast to remove 2 conditions is worth it. And the reason why I don't think it's worth it is because of Null Field. And we'll get into Null Field in a second. We've already talked about it a little bit, but Null Field is just so much better at removing conditions, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, but Null Field completely trumps Power Cleanse. I mean, utterly trumps Power Cleanse. And it's a little bit of a shame. So I would not recommend Power Cleanse. Even in a mantra build, I don't think Power Cleanse is that good. If you're going to be in a mantra build, this is the other mantra that you should pick, which is Mantra of Concentration. Now, what that does is it gives you stability. Stability is not something we've talked about yet. And what stability is that it ignores control effects. So no stuns, knockbacks, launches, knockdowns, sync, floats, spheres, or dazes, which means pretty much it's hard to move you around. Some bosses in PvE will do knockback type of abilities, and people do it all the time in PvP. So having stability can be very, very good. One very key and simple application of having stability is stomping a player in PvP. You want to put stability on so that they can't interrupt you, so that you can get the killing blow. Just in general, though, power break can be also good for breaking stun. If you can see here, there is no other stun breaker available in the mantras. So being able to break stun and gain stability, thumbs up. That's really good. It's also on a pretty short cooldown, 2 seconds internally for power break, and then 25 seconds for the actual spell itself. And it looks like ArenaNet got Mantra of Concentration right in terms of its tooltip. So good job, ArenaNet. So that's the mantras, and there are talents that affect the mantras. One of them actually makes the mantras cast 3 times rather than 2. If you're in a mantra build, it's essential. There's another one that makes you do 4% more damage for every mantra that's up. If you're in a mantra build, that can also be very important. And then there's another talent that says that mantras heal. And again, we're going to go into all of this later, but if mantras heal your allies as you cast. And just as an FYI, anything that says heals your allies or does things for your allies also affects your character as well, not just your allies. So it's not just a benevolent thing, you're actually getting the benefit too. So technically, I suppose, you could cast a lot of different mantras and have a lot of healing going on, and it would make for an interesting support build. One last thing that I want to discuss about mantras, and then we can go into some other stuff, is that mantras have a very interesting way to be used that I don't actually think other people understand. And it's a general thing about the game, and that's when you've got something ready, like for example, we have Power Spike ready, and we're going to go back to Power Spike for this example. You can cast instant cast spells while channeling a different spell. I'm going to say that again. When you're channeling a spell, you can cast instant cast spells. So how does this apply to mantras? Well, it applies a lot to mantras, but incidentally, it also applies to all of your shatters, meaning that when you're channeling something, you can always shatter. There are some weapon abilities that are considered instant. For example, Phase Retreat is an instant cast spell, so you can always cast Phase Retreat unless you're stunned. But with mantras, for example, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to channel Mantra of Recovery. I'm going to Power Spike as well in the middle of it. Power Spike, Power Spike. So I'm doing 2 Power Spikes during the cast. So in a mantra build, you can actually, now I'm going to channel Mantra of Pain. I'm going to heal, and then we can cast Mantra of Pain, Power Lock, and then I'm going to start casting Mantra of Pain again to channel it up. So, for example, basically the way that you want to be using mantras in a mantra build is you want to be casting the ones that are up when they're up and channeling the other ones. So you almost always want to be channeling in a mantra type build if you can. Now, for example, in this case, Mantra of Distraction is on a long cooldown, so you're not going to be able to do that. But whenever you can, you should be channeling your mantras and casting other mantras. So one last thing I need to mention about mantras before we are done is what happens when you go into water with them. So if you remember, through doing any other content or any underwater content, all of your abilities change when you go into the water. If you have mantras prepped and you dive in, as long as your mantras are also on your bar, on your underwater bar, then you're okay, and you will maintain the mantras, the prepped mantra status. However, one thing that I have noticed is that if you switch to different utilities, for example, if I switch to, well, Signets might not be a good example, so let's pick something else here. I'm just going to pick some random utilities that are not mantras here, and I'm going to pick a heal that's not a mantra either. And that's kind of how it defaults, because you don't actually have mantras when you're underwater by default here. So if we prep these mantras up, what you're going to see is that when your bar changes, all of the mantras disappear, meaning all of their prep disappears. So after I finish casting these next 2 mantras, I'm going to hop into the water, my bar will change, and the prep on the mantras is going to disappear as well. Now, from a logic standpoint, I get it, because your bar doesn't have the mantras there anymore, but I kind of feel like they should stay there, and then when you come back out of the water, they should still be prepped. Because there's no benefit necessarily to having them up unless you've got the added power or added damage, trait. And maybe they could find a way to turn off that trait when you're underwater, or ignore them or something. I don't know, but it just doesn't work all that well. Like if I go underwater now, you can see all the mantras disappear, and now if I get out, it's all gone, and that's kind of lame. So If there was one thing about the Mesmer that I think that ArenaNet needs to change or work on, its mantras. I just think that they're a little clunky right now. They're not finished. It's clear from the tooltips that they're not really finished. And I think someone really needs to rethink them in some capacity. So the next thing we're going to look at is the glamour skills, which I think are pretty fun. I'm a big fan of all of the glamour skills, which you've probably seen because you've seen me cast Null Field on a multitude of occasions. So let's look at Null Field as the first one. 45-second cooldown, and what the icon means right here is that you cannot use Null Field underwater. So if you're curious as to what that little no water droplet thingy means, no Null Fielding underwater, which is a shame. It's hard for them to do reticle abilities underwater because you're sort of floating. Incidentally, strangely enough, you can time warp underwater, and time warp is a reticle. So I don't know why you can't null field underwater, but you can't null field underwater. So what does it do? It creates a field of energy. That field being a ethereal combo field, one of our favorite things in the game, that rips all boons from foes and cures all conditions on allies. So again, thematic in the bad for you, good for me category. So we've seen it, we know what it looks like. It's this awesome looking field, and you can hop out of it to give yourself chaos armor, which is pretty cool. One thing, by the way, that I found out recently is that the chaos armor cast by the staff always gives protection no matter what, but chaos armor when used after leaping out of a null field or an ethereal combo field doesn't. And the protection or the application of it through, for example, the Torch Blast finisher in an ethereal combo field doesn't add protection all the time. I don't know if this is an oversight or not. It probably is an oversight because they changed chaos armor recently to always give protection to make it more powerful, and I think that that's probably not intended. So I'd love for ArenaNet to check that out too, just to make sure that that's the case, or maybe we can get a response from them somehow. So another glamour ability that we've got here is feedback, and actually all of the glamours are abilities that are pretty much reticle abilities, except for one, and you can kind of consider it a reticle ability anyway. So we've seen what feedback did in the other video, and if you haven't looked at feedback, or if you didn't watch that video, I suggest you go do it. But again, it's a gigantic purple bubble that reflects projectiles for the target that's inside of it. So it's also an ethereal combo field, thumbs up for that, that's great. And if you have a ranged target, you can use it and reflect all the projectiles back onto the ranged target's face. Incidentally, if you level in Kessex Hills and you do the dynamic event that incorporates a pirate that goes into basically an Asura Golem type of machine, that dynamic event's pretty hard at level 15. But if you have feedback, what you can do is use feedback on him when he does his gigantic lightning AoE, and he'll kill himself and hop out of the golem, and then you can continue on with the dynamic event. That happened to me when I was leveling up, and I audibly shouted at the screen about how amazing that was because no one else was here. So it was an awesome moment. So feedback has some great utility. It's also fantastic in World versus World, castle sieging, stopping people from being on the walls, or if they're shooting up at you, you can put feedback down. I've seen people kill themselves with it. I don't generally use it in PvP because people just hop out of it and who cares. There are some better utilities for PvP, but World versus World feedback has some great utility. And then there's Portal. Now, if you've played the game Portal from Valve, you kind of get the concept. Portal's awesome. Portal's really, really fun. And I'm failing at jumping up there, so whatever, I'll just do it this way. What Portal does is it puts down on the first press a not filled in or clear looking portal with butterflies flying into it. And then if you stay in range, a 1200 range, and you cast Portal again, you get a completed portal and a little icon that says use portal, so you can pass through it. And then if you go back into it, you can use it again. So you can actually pass back and through portal back and forth. I really, really like this ability. I think that it has some very creative use. There are lots of uses in World versus World for Portal because it's unlimited the amount of players that can use it. So if you combine it with, for example, the Mass Invisibility Elite, you can Mass Invisibility the people around you, and then you can Portal and then run past, for example, like when a gate opens up, you can run past the initial onslaught and then appear a little bit further over. Or if you want to go invisible, you can put a portal down, invisible yourself only, and then portal on the other side, and your whole team can sort of get in. to a castle, so that's really fun. It's also really good in jumping puzzles. If you go to jumping puzzles, you should have portal equipped, because if you fall, if you're doing a hard jump, you can always just portal and get yourself back up there. So portal is an ability that I would say is limited entirely and only by your creativity, and I love stuff like that. I think that's really fun. So portal is one of my favorite utilities. It doesn't have a place in every build, but it can be extremely fun. And again, since you switch out utilities often, you should use portal in the appropriate scenario. And then the final ability in the glamour category is Veil. And Veil is very similar to Mass Invisibility. It's a line reticle, and it's actually the only other combo field light that Mesmers have access to besides the reticle line ability off of the focus that we went over in the first video. So you put it down, it looks exactly the same, but when you cross it, you go invisible. And this happens to your allies as well. So if you're quick, you can actually cross it and then cross it again and then cross it again. But essentially it's just invisibility. Now this has uses everywhere. It's got uses in PvE if you don't want to get attacked. It's got uses in PvP, and again, Veil is also very good in World versus World. You can use it in a similar way to Mass Invisibility, and it's also on the same cooldown. It's a little bizarre that an ability so similar to our Elite is put on one of our utilities, but I'll take it. I don't actually think Mass Invisibility is an Elite that you should use all that often, and it's okay, so it's 4 seconds versus 5 seconds, so 1 more second of stealth, which is fine on the Mass Invisibility, but I don't think 1 second is worth your Elite slot. So we'll get into Elites in a second, but I don't really know that Mass Invisibility, it's weird. That's a very strange decision on their part. So then let's hop over into the signets really quickly, and then we'll go over the next few. Now the signets are all pretty good, and the basic idea of signets is they give you a passive effect, and then they, when you activate them, give you a positive effect. So Signet of Inspiration is a support related signet, and it gives a random boon every 10 seconds. This is sort of in that Mesmer chaos type of theme that happens with the class. I don't love Signet of Inspiration because once every 10 seconds is not reliable enough for me, and it's kind of awkward to get Might when you're looking for protection, or Swiftness when you're looking for Aegis, or Vigor, which I almost never, who wants Vigor? So, I mean, that's Signet of Inspiration is probably the weakest of the signets. I'm not so impressed with it, but it can be good in a support-based build where you give yourself all kinds of buffs through, like, for example, if you put Chaos Storm down and you give Aegis, then you can Signet of Inspiration and give Aegis to everyone else, which is a nice little bonus. You have to get pretty artful with it. I do feel like this is jumping through hoops a little bit to do similar things that other classes can just do normally, and that being said, I'm not so impressed with Signet of Inspiration as one of the signets. Now, Signet of Midnight, increases boon duration, so that's good. Very solid in a supporty type build with Chaos Storm and, you know, your staff. And incidentally, if you're playing support, I really do think you should be using the staff as one of the primary weapons. But then again, I'm in love with the staff, so don't mind me. And then the activate is blind nearby foes, so it's sort of an AoE blind in a very similar way to the torch being an AoE blind. So very nice, has definite uses, and I recommend trying it out if you want to try like a Signet build and a support build. This is a perfect support because if you want to blind enemies so that your allies don't take any damage, that's also really, really useful. So Signet of Midnight's very, very good. Signet of Domination is for improved condition damage, very usable with the staff. It gives you, I believe it's 90 extra condition damage, and then stun your foe. So some people take this just in order to play with it in PvP, and that can be very useful. And the improved condition damage is always pretty nice too. Unlike the Guardian you just saw there, the cast is really, really quick. Guardians have a signet, I believe it's called Bane Signet, that knocks someone down and does some damage, and that's a quite long cast. So Signet of Domination is pretty good for being able to knock someone down, or I'm sorry, stun them nice and fast. And then there's Signet of Illusions. Now they just fixed a bug with this where it used to give 300% health to your illusions, which was just absolutely ridiculous. Right now it's at plus 50% health. It doesn't really matter for your clones because your clones die a lot anyway, but your phantasms can get a little tanky, and that's pretty cool. So Signet of Illusions in a tanky phantasm type build is pretty great. And then it also is good in a shatter type build if you are into shattering a lot and you want to you know, pump out a lot of guys, shatter, pump out a lot of guys, shatter again. If you have specific shatters in mind, for example, like Mind Rack, you can use this in a Mind Racking build pretty effectively. So Signet of Illusions gets a nod to, you know, the side of the utilities that are pretty good, whereas mantras sort of are sitting all by themselves in the side of utilities that are pretty bad. Let's look then at the manipulations, which are the third and final, but not quite final, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, utility class. So there's Arcane Thievery, and they buffed this during the betas from, I think it was 90 seconds down to 45, and that's great. So you basically switch conditions with people. This is sort of the, you switch conditions and steal all their boons. This is very similar to, or a counter to, I should say, necromancers who use corrupting boons. I'm not sure that's the actual name of the utility, but it's a pretty cool utility that takes any boons that are on the target and corrupts them into conditions. And what you can sort of do if a necro does that, and this is very tournament-esque, is you can send them back. So you can just basically say, well, you wiped my boons, but, you know, guess what? I'm going to steal your boons and I'm going to put them back on you. So Arcane Thievery has some great uses. I really like Arcane Thievery as a concept, but it's a very selfish spell. And what I mean by that is that you can accomplish the same thing, meaning that you can get rid of your conditions by casting Nullfield, which is, you know, again, I love Nullfield, so, you know, I'm a little biased, but you can cast Nullfield and then you can do the same thing. You get rid of the boons on your target and you get rid of the conditions on you. Arcane Thievery is a 1-to-1, whereas Nullfield is everything in it. Arcane Thievery is instant, whereas Nullfield is not. They slowly tick down and disappear, so your conditions will not be wiped off right away, so you have to stay in Nullfield when you're using Nullfield, and that's something I didn't mention before, but you should really keep that in mind. And then Arcane Thievery also gives conditions to your enemy, so it's more offensive. Offensive builds can certainly take great advantage of Arcane Thievery. Also, if there are bosses in PvE that put a lot of conditions on, and you guys are in a dungeon group where you guys all want to be responsible for your own conditions, Arcane Thievery has a great place there. So I like Arcane Thievery. I think it's a pretty good spell. Now, Illusion of Life is weird. Basically, what happens is it's a reticle that you drop, and you drop it on down players. So if there's a down player, you throw this down, you get a little puff, and then after the puff, that player stands back up, and they stand back up for 15 seconds. If they do kill something, an enemy of any kind, so PvP, if they get a stomp, or if they get a PvE kill, they'll stay up. So it's like a revive, very similar to the Warrior Banner. Using this requires coordination. I would not suggest using this in a public PvP game, and I would not really suggest using this in a pug dungeon run unless you explain to people what this is first, because they often don't understand why they've been resurrected, essentially, and then they die after the 15 seconds is up. So if you don't really want that to happen, people will be a little confused. So I suggest explaining what Illusion of Life is. But that being said, it's a very powerful support-related ability if you can coordinate it. The one time I would not use Illusion of Life is during a boss fight that doesn't have any adds, because if someone goes down and you can bring them back up, that's all well and good, but it doesn't make any sense to bring someone up on a boss that you know you're not going to kill, and there's no adds to kill either. So that person's just going to get up for 15 seconds and then die permanently. And that's something to keep in mind with Illusion of Life, is that if you bring someone up and they don't succeed in killing something, they die all the way. They don't go back to being down. So you can end up killing someone in a situation like that. So don't do that. Then you've got Echo. Now, Echo's a little weird. It looks pretty cool, though. I really love the way it looks. When you cast it, you put a little bubble up, and it's a channel. And if you absorb, if you get a spell cast on you, or a projectile, then you can shoot it back. So this will change, the tooltip will change, and you can send it back to your foe. That's pretty nice. One thing about it, though, is that if, for example, like a thief is doing like unload on you, or a mob is doing several shots, you're going to absorb one of the tiny little ones. Or like a Mesmer's, for example, illusionary duelist shot, like you'll absorb one. And who cares? I mean, they're like, if you want to reflect projectiles, use mirror or use feedback. Don't really use echo. I feel like echo needs to be buffed in some way. I mean, it would be ridiculous if you stored up everything that was shot at you and then you shot it all back in one big shot, but that'd be cool. What I think would maybe be better is if it was a 2-second spell on a short cooldown, meaning like 10 seconds. Maybe not 10. Geez, that's crazy. Maybe 15. That might be a little bit more fair. And it was only a 2-second absorb, so you had to be really quick about it. And if you didn't, then you know, you lose the advantage, I guess. 4 seconds is a little too long in my opinion. So Echo probably needs a little tweaking. I don't generally use it unless you know that there's a mob that's going to do like an outrageously large hit, then maybe you can use it. And you know, that's for you to figure out if you're in a situation where that's going to happen. So then what we've got after looking at manipulation, now let me just make sure that we've gone over all of the manipulation spells here. Looks like we have. So what we're going to do next is talk about the other utilities here. Now, these other utilities, as I touched on, are clones and phantasms. So you've got 2 clone abilities in decoy and mirror images, and you've seen me use mirror images a whole bunch. I use it with the staff a lot because when I play staff, I play with staff clones. So what mirror images does, I'm going to go to the light golem so I can kill it quicker and get out of combat. But that does, if you use it in conjunction with phase retreat, is produces a full round of clones for you right away. Now I'm not in a condition damagey type build, so don't be too unimpressed with the absolutely ridiculously low amount of bleed damage that I'm doing here. But mirror images is good. It's also really good in a shattery build that focuses on summoning lots of stuff, shattering away, and then summoning lots of stuff again. So there's a couple of interesting ways to use mirror images. As I've mentioned in the build that I have right now, this was like the mantra build that I was screwing around with that was just terrible. In illusions, this 5-point illusionist celerity skill should be used almost always when you're using mirror images because it brings the cooldown down. So again, if we refund traits here and I take illusionist celerity, it was 45 seconds, goes down to 36 seconds. So that's pretty good. And if you're using, like I mentioned before, almost every Mesmer build should be using illusionist celerity. And that mantra build was a small exception because I basically just took every trait that said the word mantra in it. Or almost every trait that did. So anyway, additionally, the other clone that is available is decoy. Now decoy is real fun. Basically, you gain stealth and summon an illusion to attack your foe. It's on a 35-second cooldown, reduced down to 32 with illusionist celerity. It also breaks stun. This is one of my top 3 Mesmer abilities. And actually, now that I'm saying that, I do realize that I did skip blink and manipulation. We've gone over it before, so let's just touch on it really quickly. Small reticle, you put it down on anywhere that you can walk, and you teleport there. I love blink. I think it's one of the better Mesmer abilities, both for kiting and for PvP, PvE. It's usable in a lot of scenarios. The only time I don't use blink is in dungeons because it's not that useful there because you're not kiting as much. But anytime you want to kite, blink is a default that you pretty much need to be using. No underwater, unfortunately, which is kind of lame, but it is what it is. Blink is one of my standard utilities, though I use it almost all the time unless it's a dungeon group. So back to decoy. You gain stealth and summon an illusion to attack your foe, meaning that you gain stealth and stand still, and then a clone pops out that looks exactly like you. Very easy to fool your opponents. So really fun in PvP. Basically, this is what it looks like. You cast a spell, you disappear, and then a second later, the clone appears and starts shooting at the target that you had targeted. So the stealth is pretty short, 3 seconds, but if you cast it and then you dodge roll away and run away, a lot of people will be like, oh, he just went stealth and now he's back, and you know, now I'll try to kill this clone. Additionally, you can just use it to generate a clone no matter what. If you just want an extra clone, you can do it that way too. So decoy is really fun. It's got great uses in PvE. Any use of stealth in PvE will stop mobs from attacking you, so that's very good. And again, you know, if you just need an extra clone, you can use it that way, although that's not really taking full advantage of it. So those are the 2 clone abilities in the toolkit. And then there's finally 2 phantasm abilities. Now, I don't like either of them really all that much, although I do understand the case for Phantasmal Defender. Now, he's on a 30-second down to 24 with Illusionist Celerity, and you summon him up, and he smacks himself into the, he's got a shield, and starts hitting the mob that you're hitting with the shield. basically what this guy does is redirects half of the damage you receive onto itself. This is really cool with the Signet of Illusions, because this guy will get 50% more health, which means that effectively your health pool is increased a little bit as well. So this guy, what it really does is it increases your health pool by half of its own health pool, because it redirects half of the damage. So I apologize, it redirects half of the damage you would take. So you have a double-sized health pool for the life of the defender. Now, I don't know how much HP the defender has on its own, but it can get really, really interesting if you have multiple up. And, you know, I don't know that you will all that often, though, because having multiple up implies that you this one hasn't died. But you can see that they both have this thing called Illusion of Defense. Half of incoming damage is transferred to the illusionary defender. So that's pretty helpful, and you have it down here too. It might overlap in a funny way here, but I don't really use Illusionary Defender too much. I have tried it in like a tanky type of build that, you know, you want to take a lot less damage. It can be decent, but in general, I like the other Phantasms more. And then there's Phantasmal Disenchanter, and let's just head back over here. This is on a short cooldown, 20 seconds down to 16, so very, very short cooldown. And what it does is it attacks the target and then cures. So it does this bouncing thing, as you see here. Watch it. It'll do a bouncing attack, and then it'll go to allies, and it'll go to it'll just bounce around to allies like this. And so what it does is it removes boons from foes. So its attack does a small amount of damage, as you can see, and then removes a boon from a foe, and then the bounce back hits allies and cures conditions. It's not reliable. I don't think it's that good because of the unreliability of the Phantasm. It's pretty easy to summon a couple of them, so maybe if you're in a support build and you don't care about the damage you're doing, you can go through cycling and summoning 3 of these guys. And if you do that, then you can have 3 up attacking a boss, doing a minimal amount of damage, but making sure that conditions are constantly being removed. And that could be pretty good. But overall, if I want to remove conditions and cure and take boons off of people, I'm going Null Field, because Null Field is just, it's an ethereal combo field, and it's not subject to just getting killed by something, which is the Disenchanter certainly is. So it has uses, but not perfect uses. I think it's outclassed by Null Field, frankly. One other thing I want to touch on Decoy and any stealthing ability that we have access to is that if you go stealth, you can stomp a player, or you can revive something in PvE. So I recommend doing that. Decoy is a great reviving type of skill, and I highly recommend that you revive people in PvE whenever you can, and in PvP whenever you can. Reviving is really, really important. So when someone's down, get to it and go help them back up. And stealthing abilities are really good for that. So back to stealthing abilities here on our elites, because I think we've covered pretty much everything from a utility standpoint. We have Mass Invisibility as the first one. Now, I'm not going to cast it because it's going to go on a 90-second cooldown, but basically you cast it, and then you and in an AoE around you, everyone goes invisible. This is, again, subject to your creativity. Use stealth in a creative way. You can use it to get away from someone, you can use it to sneak up on someone, you can use it to kite, or not kite, but skirt around a group of mobs that you don't feel like killing in PvE. It has a lot of interesting uses. So this is something that you'll probably switch out for when you want to do something very specific. Then there's Time Warp. Now, Time Warp gives quickness, and this is something that we haven't really gone over either, but Time Warp itself is a radical ability, and it's an ethereal combo field, as we've discussed. I mentioned this in the last video. And Time Warp creates an area that gives quickness to everything in it. So let me just cast it on this ranger here. See how fast he's casting? Look at how crazy that is. And it shoots confusion out, and so if someone's inside Time Warp, they're going to get, that was a physical projectile finisher, that what just happened to him. So he was shooting confusion out onto the target as well. So Time Warp's awesome. It's also the only way that anyone can get more than a couple seconds of quickness. It's 10 seconds of quickness. So actually, and I'm not just tooting my own horn here or tooting the Mesmer horn, but I'm pretty sure that Time Warp is in the top 2 elites in the game. It's in the top 5, 100%, certainly, without a doubt. The Guardian, like, full heal is probably up there as well. Tome of Courage, I think it's called. There are a couple other really good elites, but Time Warp is just absolutely phenomenal. That being said, I'm going to wait for this to cool down. I'll turn the video off, and then we're going to hop into the last elite, which is Moomorph, because Moomorph is pretty high up there in power too. So I'll be right back 1 second. And we're back, although that was an indiscernible period of time for you. Last elite that I want to talk about, last thing on our list here, is Moomorph. 10 seconds of turning into a Moa. This is so good in PvP, it's not even funny. In structured PvP, at least. Its best use is when you're attacking someone who's right before they're gonna heal. If you can catch them into a Moa when they're at like half health and they want, like, you know they want to heal, and you Moa them, they can't heal and they'll die. But in addition, it stops people from doing crazy things. Like, you know those thieves that spam Heartseeker that everyone freaking hates? Well, if a thief, understand that if a thief is spamming Heartseeker on your face and he's doing lots of damage, then he's probably got like 12,000 health. Thieves are actually one of the other classes that have the like super low health pool. And he's got like no defensive talents whatsoever. So what you should do is, if a thief is coming at you in structured PvP and you know he's a Heartseeker spammer, Moa him and just crush his skull. It's really, really easy to shut people down with Moa. It's just got tons of applications. It's also great on elite mobs or champion mobs if you know a big hit's coming, or just to make things a little easier. In PvE, bosses get this thing called Defiance, which means that they actually can't be CC'd. But if you Moa as the first thing, you'll actually Moa bosses if they don't have any stacks of Defiance on them, which is really cool. So you can use it to also in a dungeon. For example, let's say that you're in a dungeon and I mentioned Caudicus's Manor before. There's a pull in Caudicus's Manor specifically where there's lots of ranged guys. So let's say, for example, there's a ton of ranged dudes around and you want to shut one of the ranged guys down for a little while. You can feedback on his face and then Moomorph after the feedback is done, and you've turned that guy off for the duration of the feedback, which is 6 seconds, and then 10 seconds of Moomorphing, which is just fantastic. I mean, there's no way to argue with that. It's just really, really good. This guy just did it on the heavy target goal, and that's an amazingly good coincidence. I guess he's testing out the scepter here. But yeah, I mean, basically, it looks like he's got Scepter Torch. That's a condition damage Mesmer, by the way. Drake D Shadow. So anyway, Moa. I'll cast on this guy in case you want to see it again. But it turns the thing into a Moa. Now this is a passive one, but if it's a mob, it'll be like a Moa mob and it'll attack you. By the way, incidentally, I didn't go into combat, which is interesting. Incidentally as well, if you do it on a player, they'll get a whole host of abilities that are Moa-like abilities, and if you've experienced this in PvP, don't use them. Do not use them. You can dodge roll while you're a Moa. If you get turned into one, you can dodge roll. So you can actually, your Moa will run a little quicker. There's no animation for a dodge rolling Moa. Man, that would be cool, wouldn't it? But there isn't one. So you can do it. You will lose endurance, and your character will dodge roll, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it'll just like scurry your way. And if you get mowed in PvP, run until it's over. Don't do anything else because you'll just die. In structured PvP, and if your group calls a target, you can call a target, mow them, and everyone can DPS that guy down and they'll die. There's just no defense against it. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Moa was reduced in duration a little while because it is just so good. So that's basically it for the utilities. It's amazing to me that this video has run as long as it has. So if you had the stamina to stick with me through the whole thing, I really appreciate it. If you have any questions or have some suggestions, I know there's some more nuance in the utilities that I may not have covered. Some of it can be discovered by you. A lot of the Mesmer skills and utilities are open-ended, like Portal, for example, and any of the stealthing abilities, and are really just bound by your creativity. So get to it, go play with them a little bit. If you discover something interesting, let me know. I can add it to a future video, and then otherwise we'll see you next time. Probably the next video that I cover is going to cover structured PvP a little bit and maybe a couple of builds. in structured PvP. If you want to see what a power shattering type of build looks like, I do have a video already on my channel from one of the beta weekends. The talents were a little bit different back then, but the principle is the same, although I will admit that I was stomping a bunch of noobs who had no idea what was going on, so it wasn't that challenging. But I will go into a full discussion of some builds as well. If people have some suggestions as to what builds they want to see, that's no problem. Also, to address one other thing that people have been asking me about is, do I do this for other classes? The answer is not right now. I want to finish the Mesmer first, and then I'm going to be leveling my Guardian. I'm sure if you've been listening to what I've been saying in this entire video, I know a lot about Guardians too. There are some videos on my channel from the beta weekends when I was playing a Guardian, and actually the two-handed build on that on my channel is still really relevant and very, very good, and Guardian will be my first alt. I think they're a fantastic class, and I will probably go into Guardian next. I know that people have been asking about Necro. I know a couple of different Necro builds, but I haven't leveled one to 80, and I don't feel like I'm an authority on the class. I do have friends that are currently doing that, however, and maybe we can get something, you know, a collaborative effort or something like that. So if you want to see some other class guides, we can look into it, but I want to finish the Mesmer first, and you know, I want to go into some really advanced stuff in the next couple of videos. So that's where we're headed. Thank you for sticking with me. You guys are freaking fantastic. I really appreciate it. If you need anything from me, you can always send me an in-game mail. My character's name that I play on my Mesmer, the name is Centerfold, and the server is Dragon Brand. So come say hi, and otherwise I guess we'll see you next time.